Hello, so we're going to go over some CSS typography. So we'll try to go through this very fast because a lot of the rest of the CSS stuff is just not necessarily, just the point of you need to know is that it exists, and you guys have been playing with the W3 schools, so you know one of the good resources to how to find it. But we're just going to go through this kind of quick because I want to move on to some other things in this class. So there's selector patterns. So in this example, H1s and whatever the text content would be be color red. I want to pause this and open up some text editor. Okay, so I'm in an HTML page and I got a style sheet loaded. So an example of what would be for this one right here, let me pull it up. Yes, it's the same one. Okay. So go back to the book. So I'm going to do an embedded or internal styling on this because I'm in the HTML page, as you can see. Not styling. Oh, son of a bitch. Okay, now I got it. So on this right here, so if we were doing H1 and color red, it's now all red. Change it to color white again. All right. So often, however, you want your style rules to apply to specific elements, such as H1 headings found within articles, but not anywhere else. So we're talking about selector patterns. So contextual selectors, the first selector pattern you'll examine is contextual selector. It specifies the content under a particular page element is matched. Context is based on the hierarchical structure of the document, which involves the relationship between a parent element and a child element. So on this one right here, we was given an example if they are in a header, H1, color red. I don't know if I have any headers in this one. The header was in the logo. So let's try this. That won't work either. Okay, this isn't a good example. Let's make some edits in the content here. Let's do article because we already have a H1 nested in an article, and we discussed this in another video prior. Okay, so the head H1 that's found in an article tag is what makes those change. So you can make an edit to just one particular element without that meets one criteria, like this being in an article and not in the nav or the aside. So go on, so forth. Let's see. Contextual selectors. I've never used this. Never really used the wildcard or the sibling selectors. I think that's kind of getting into the weeds of it. I want to just focus on the concepts of how to get CSS to work. I feel like this is going into the weeds where I don't really want to go into. But if you want to learn more about it, feel free. I just don't want to for this class. Take a break after a previous session, make sure, okay. So what are we in? TSS styles, okay. I'm going to undo whatever it is I did in here. You can leave this style tags on there and it doesn't hurt anything. And just saves you from typing it in again later. So within the aside and block quote style section, insert the following rule. Okay, so we're applying that to your new style. Let's look at this. Does this do anything yet? Oh, it does. So you can see, because you remember this was the aside section, comments was aside. Okay. But we only apply this, move this down. Try that again. That's what I was wanting to do. Okay. So we're going to look for, so what we're doing is telling the browser to look for anything that says aside. So after we find aside, we got to look for anything that says block quote and apply the styling. You'll note that the block quote, those and block quotes are the only ones that got affected. Like this H1 for comments was not affected. Let's see what would happen if we would take that out. Oh, okay. Well, I guess this one, H1, yeah. So the styling for H1 takes precedence over the aside because it's one that's closest to this. But what if you had, like, say we got a paragraph in here. Put block quote back in. Okay. So the paragraph that I have in here, since it's not a block quote, it's not adopting the this kind of styling. If we say we want block quote and paragraphs, it would adopt it. Looks like it would adopt it for more. Yeah. Now it's adopted for all paragraphs. Let's say if we did block quote, that should still work the same. Yeah, okay. This is affected, this is affected. Shoot, that's not what to do. What happened there? That's not what I wanted to do either because it's affecting all these other paragraphs. So what I might have to do is Okay. So I spoke before about how you can put multiple tags in one kind of styling by using the comma. If I just use the comma, say I have side block quote, I wanted to apply this color, and I also want to apply to the paragraphs that's in here. Say I, for example, have paragraphs and lists and who knows what else. But I only want the block quotes and the paragraphs to have this kind of color. I want the list to be unchanged. If I do it this way, because it's a comma T, it's going to read, it's like, okay, all paragraphs are going to have that kind of styling, which is not the intent, as you can see right here. I don't want that. What I want is for anything that's in the aside. So you have to put the aside caret. So we're telling it, look for the aside, then look for the block quote. Or the aside and then the paragraph. And then it should just affect the area that we're wanting it to. Okay. I'll go ahead and get rid of that because I kind of went off on a side right there. Put that back to order. And this, okay, moving on. Attribute selectors. So you'll see that we've been talking about IDs and classes. So attributes or the IDs in the classes are often key in targeting styles to specific elements. So the ID attribute is to identify specific elements within the document. If I was a student, I would make a note of this right here. ID can only be used one time in a document. Think of it. It has to be unique. Think of it like your own unique ID, such as social security number, student ID, etc. It's unique, right? There's only one. To apply a selector to an element based on its ID, you have to, and you use either the selector ID or the selector. I only use this one. I don't know what this is. So to apply a style, so make a note. Use hashtag ID when applying a style. Let's see. So ID is the name of the value of the ID attribute, and elements the. Because IDs are supposed to be unique, either form is acceptable, but because the element name removes any confusion about the location of the selector. Okay. I guess that's what they were talking about on that. It can be entered either as title or H1 title in your CSS style sheet. I just do this. I've never used this version before. I suppose I could see the advantage of doing it that way to be clear on what it is that you're doing, but it's just never come up for me. Because no two elements can share the same ID, HTML uses the class attribute to identify groups of elements that share similar characteristics. So can use class element and multiple times in one document. Think of it like multiple persons in a class. So to do that, you use the period. So like you would, again, this is the, I've not used it like this. I've only used it like this. So I'm sure we'll come to an example here in a little bit and you'll understand it. Okay, we're going to do an example now. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. Go to the TSS style sheet, and we're looking at, what are we looking at? Heading styles. Okay, give me a second. Changes. Okay, this is not a way I've done it before, so we're going to do how the book says, and then I'll tell you if I would have done it differently. So we are going to, we're under heading styles, which for me is starts on line 31. Select H1 headings, and then we're going to do as the book says, article dot article hashtag. Spell article right. Article hashtag about TSS H1. Same thing here. Article hashtag about TSS H2. Okay, so we're going to save our changes and reload the page. And so what we've changed is, so the links in the comments, they went back to, I think, what was the default. And the only thing that's remained unchanged is the articles. So let's look at the article. Where's article? There we go. So we see article. There's a tag for the article. Now we're saying it has an ID of about TSS. So you can see the correlation article, and we're saying that we're looking for, with this hashtag symbol, that hashtag that represents an ID. And we're looking, the ID we're looking for is about TSS, about TSS. And then the tag that we're referring to for this one, H1, about TSS, and it has a font color, white background color, not whatever, orange color. Same thing here, article. The hashtag represents the ID about TSS, which is still the ID here, and H2, which is further on down. Okay. So on the HTML page, because it's an ID about, the ID that we're giving this one about TSS can only be used once. On the CSS page, we can use it, as you can see, multiple times because we're just giving styling dependent upon like the H1 or the H2. We could do the same thing. Article about TSS paragraphs. We can say background color black, color for the font is white. Save it. You can see it's applied to the paragraphs. So whenever we're giving styling, we're providing styling if it's an article, if it has an ID of about TSS, and for the specific elements we want, whether it's paragraphs, headings, the different size headings or whatever. Okay. But it can only be used once. An ID can only be used once in an HTML. So let's try the way that I've always done it, and that's taking out those article right there. And it still works. So I can see the advantage of putting the article in there for clarification. That's just not the way I was taught to do it. But yeah, whatever. Whatever works for you. There's more than one way to do this. I can see the advantage of it for clarity. But it's kind of really up to you. But it's really up to you. Okay. Because ID can only be used once. This is kind of repetitive because it can only use once. I could see maybe if we were doing a class. Hold on, let me try something. Okay, so what I was trying didn't work, so we're just move on. So to apply a selector class. Okay. Move that over. Let's see. We're going to go to TSS run text HTML. TSS byte text HTML. And TSS swim. Okay, and our name and date and stuff like that, like we've been doing. Okay, so within each of the three files, insert the following link elements. Oh, we're supposed to rename them. Hold on. I'm just going to go ahead and start renaming them instead of saving as, because I don't see the purpose of. I'm not seeing the purpose for just saving it as instead of renaming them. So I'm just going to start renaming them. So this one right here, you can right click, rename, back that out. Right click, rename, back that out. What was the other one? Okay. So within each of the three files, insert the following link elements before the closing head tag to link these files to the TSS layout and style CSS. I'm going to type it in one, and then it's going to copy and paste it in the others. Going to wrap this. Okay. So I'm going to copy that. Go right before the closing head on the rest of the other two files, the bike and the swim, and paste it. Okay, note that the article element has a class attribute. So let's look at these files a little bit. So there's the link. So I'm in the swim right now. So we have our logos in the header. We have our navigation. We have our ordered list. We have our list elements. We have our article. It's got a class of syllabus, and so on and so forth. Okay. See how this extension worked. Wait. Okay, we're going to be previewing some more pages, and instead of us having to save and then manually preview on the web browser, we're going to download another extension. So let me clear this out. So if you look down in the extension areas where it's just those little squares that are kind of broken up, get rid of that, start from here. Those little squares that are broken up, what you're looking for is web preview. And there's all kinds of different options, but the one I'm going to recommend is this one right here, preview on web server. So you will click install, and it talks about the features of it, how to preview it on the side panel, and then how we can actually preview it in the browser. And it can just save you a couple steps, especially as we start previewing more stuff to see our changes. So it's installed. So the way it works is this. Okay, I'm in the HTML for swim, and I hit Control-Shift-V. It opens up the preview on the side. That's in another tab. I think Control-Shift-L was to launch it into another browser. Maybe mistaken. I'm gonna have to check that out. Oh, no, that worked. I thought I saw it. Maybe not. No, it did. Okay, there it is. So it control. Let's see. Show you where to find it exactly. So if you're not sure how to use something, you can pull up the extensions, and it gives you Control-Shift-V, opens it in the side panel, and to launch on the browser, it's Control-Shift-L. Okay. And let's see, put that split. Oh, why what I was wanting to do. Let's try this again. Okay. So as we make changes, you can see after we hit save, it's automatically going to make these changes here. Let's go back to not that. Let's see. So we got those styling sheets linked up. Return to the CSS style, and we are going to try to get myself situated so I can have as much room as possible. Turn road wrap on. So within, I'm in the style, I need to go in the styles. Road wrap on. Add the following style rule to display of the text of an H1 and H2 headings. So, heading styles. We're going to look for article. We're telling the browser look for an article tag with syllabus class, which is indicated with the period. And we're looking for the H1 tag. And we're also going to tell it to look for article, period, indicating the class, syllabus, H2, open curly, background color, RGB, 255, 185, 255, color, RGB, 101, 101, 101, 101. Okay. And it should look like that. So I'm going to expand this. And let's see. Trying to figure out what I'm at here. So this is a swim preview. Move this down or not. Just trying to get it so I can see both things. We get rid of that. So here's the swim HTML. Here's the styles that we just applied. So we're saying article, period is for the class, syllabus, the class that we're looking for, syllabus, H1, then there's H1 tag. So again, for the article, we're looking for a period of class, or a period indicating the class. For syllabus used anywhere else on here? No, just that one. For H2, there. So if we go back to our browser, there it is. Okay, it's pink. And with gray font, looks like. So we made some edits to the class. based off of the class name of syllabus. Okay. So we can calculate selector specificity. The general rule in CSS is that the more specific selector takes precedence over the more general selector. So the application of this rule is not always clear. For example, if you have a header H1 with a class up top, or if you have an ID of main of H1, the main is more selective than the general. So that rule is going to be specified or used. Let's see. Hold on. Okay, I'm reading this section right here about the insight. I think that is going into the weeds a little bit on that. So just understand that it exists. I don't know how important it's going to play in right now, or when it may come into something you might want to need to know. But just be aware that this is a thing, and that how there's numbers assigned to declare the specificity of it. I've never heard it taught in this way with the numbers assigned, but just be aware that might be something that you might have to come to later on down the road. Working with fonts, typography is the art of designing the appearance of characters and letters on a page. So we can play with the different kind of fonts. Let's see. So you can choose a font family. You can do serif, sans serif, monospace, cursive, fantasy. There's a bunch of other ones you can use. Because you have no control over which font definition file that the browsers will choose for a generic font, common practice is to list specific fonts first in order of preference at the end of the font stack with a generic font. If the browser cannot find any specific fonts listed, it uses the generic font of its own choosing. For example, here. So we talked about how, let's make a note here. About the remember the order of precedence of styling rules that are used applied on a web page. First is browser styling, depending on which browser you use. Second equals user defined, dark theme, etc. Third is external styling. Fourth is embedded or internal style sheets. Fifth is inline. Oh, I'm not buying max here, evidently. Let's take that word off. Inline. Okay. So those are the order of styling. So your browser's going to look at something. Say your browser's going to look at something, and unless you tell it to work in another kind of fashion, it's going to apply whatever its default styling is. Let's see. So you can look at some websites, because the available fonts vary by operating system and device. The challenge is to choose the font stack limited to web-safe fonts. So there's an example there. Let's see. fonts. Talks about some sizes, external fonts. It's not quite what I was looking for on this. Let's just Google web say fonts. There we go. So when you're trying to decide on what kind of font you to use, there's a resource here of website fonts. To specify a font family in the page, we're going to go back to